Hi, everybody. My name is Kenzie Serrano. I was born in Honduras, Central America. I am an undocumented fighting for a legal status here in the United States. I have 5 children. This is Matthew, the youngest. Um, I was detained at a nice facility last year for 3 months. Though I was so close to my house, I couldn't be with my children. They would come and visit me, but through a glass, and we could only have conversations through a phone. It was a hard, difficult time. Um, my husband is also fighting legal status here in the United States. And at the moment, we're also facing the being displaced from our homes. I live in Aurora, Colorado, and I live in a mobile home community that is being displaced. And so we're fighting for that as well. And I think it was just fate that brought me through all these movements, because now I see how they all just kind of connect. And through these movements, I've just been able to connect and to meet really great and wonderful people. And I'm just glad to be here with you guys. And thank you for opening up this space to share my story with you guys.
Hi, all. My name is Monica Heinz, and I'm a representative here for the Colorado Sierra Club. And I was an active member of the Denver Ready for 100 campaign, and also a volunteer with the Denver Beyond Coal group. And I'm a geoscientist by training, and I'm excited for this conversation today.
Hi, I'm Jan Rose. I am the chair of the Denver Boulder chapter of the Climate Reality Project, which is the nonprofit started with the proceeds from the movie An Inconvenient Truth, and is run by Al Gore. So I spend a lot of my time giving presentations on the severity and status of the climate crisis and what solutions are currently available and in the process of becoming available to help us solve this crisis. I am also a member of 350 Colorado and on the team of people working on the Denver Ready for 100 initiative. And for this particular panel, I am one of the speakers for Proposition 112, which was formerly known as Initiative 97. It's to require that fracking wells be moved 2,500 feet away from our homes, our schools, our water sources, and anything else like a nuclear power plant that we may not want to stick an exploding fracking well near. But those are decisions that will be made by the state and local municipalities of Colorado. So I will be representing that effort and then also willing to back up everybody else on our efforts statewide for the Ready for 100 campaign.
Thank you, Jen. Hi. My name's Emily Hiltz, and okay, let's see. I am representing a few things today. So I am the former Ready for 100 organizer for Denver for the Colorado Sierra Club, who worked with both these lovely ladies on that commitment with Mayor Hancock. I currently am a local organizer with Colorado Working Families, which is a progressive political organization that, among many other things, focuses on propping up candidates and initiatives that focus on racial, economic justice, and environmental justice. I also am a member of the Denver NAACP and speaking on behalf of their Environmental Justice Committee this afternoon.
And I just wanted to mention that there are some folks from the I-70 corridor too. Emily, you might be able to speak to this better, but I guess there are like 170 sites of former still polluted areas along that corridor. So people are really still suffering with that, and also part of this, this big effort. All right, so Jamie, can you talk? And I think we'll hear you.
Yes, hi, my name is Jamie Valdez. Thank you for having me here. I'm with the Sierra Club Sangre de Cristo group, which is the southeastern portion of the state, and mostly centered in Pueblo. The Pueblo right now is exploring other utility options beyond our currently investor-owned utility via our newly formed Electric Utility Commission. And we're just trying to do the best we can to implement the resolution that's been taken by both our city and our county. Again, I'm really happy to be a part of this. Thank you for inviting me.
So I think we're just sharing this mic. Does that one work too, Jan? All right. So the idea here is we can just have a conversation, but right at the end of Emily's tenure with the Sierra Club Ready for 100 campaign in Denver, there was just a huge breakthrough. I don't know, is Jeff here also? I think I saw him earlier today. But this has been a very long effort to get the city of Denver to join the Ready for 100 campaign, to set a goal. So at the end of that, this was in July, that Mayor Hancock and the city of Denver agreed to 100% by 2030 goal. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you did that and what you see next? What do we need to be doing next?
Yeah, I can touch on some of that. Monica can pick up some other places. So I joined the Sierra Club's Ready for 100 movement back in March of 2017. And Monica and a lot of our local volunteer leaders already had a great grassroots group of committed volunteers working on this effort. We really needed to put positive public pressure on Mayor Hancock to show him the community was behind this. We, from a lot of community mapping of the city, learned that that was his greatest concern, was that he was going to make, in his eyes, a sweeping statement that he didn't know how to get to. And so we had to do two main things. The how we get there is a lot that Monica can explain more better than I can, but just raise the community voices up to him in many different ways. So initially we started with a petition. And what we found to be difficult there is a lot of our community events that we were gathering petitions at, most of them weren't Denver residents, and unfortunately their voices aren't as impactful then to Mayor Hancock. We noticed from me stalking him on Facebook and social media that he does Friday's letters with the mayor. And so we started a postcard and letter writing campaign to the mayor, because what is most powerful is your personal story. And we sent him somewhere between 500 and 1,000 letters over the campaign. A couple months into this, he made a call to action in his Friday letters with the mayor for youth voices just all around. And so we did a big push. We went into 6 Denver public schools and did a campaign there asking them to write letters, and we did tabling, petitioning there. That finally got us a meeting with some of his city staff, which was really great. What he told us then is what he really wants to see is a broad-based support of a coalition. So Jan and Monica and I all worked really hard to try and show him that all of the community is truly behind this, not just the environmental movement. That was very important for him. And so the way that we were really able to do that is focusing on the intersection of how these issues intersect in everyday people's lives, and messaging in people where they're at on these issues and finding what those things are. For a lot of people, it's not that you can't go camping because there's fire hazards and there's flooding. It's that your kid has asthma and you don't have access to public transportation, and the air is making your children really sick. We were able to make an awesome coalition that got us a great meeting with Mayor Hancock's staff and a lot of DDPHE, Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, where we were asked to display budget proposals of how actually, if he commits to this, will DDPHE be able to implement it? We had some lofty goals, and we worked directly with some of our friends in DDPHE and trying to figure out where their needs were. And we were also very tactful in making sure that we were including the labor community in this. That is a huge piece for Mayor Hancock, is what will we do for a just transition? It wasn't just a talking point. And so we were able to bring AFL-CIO to the table, SEIU to the table, Working Families, 9 to 5, Jobs for Justice, to really show him that, yes, there is a predominantly large amount of our population that the workforce is dependent upon fossil fuels, but they are ready for this as well and want to be a part of the conversation. From there, it was just continuing to be positive community pressure. So we did a photo petition campaign, just like encouraging him for the last couple months until we knew that at the State of the City he was going to commit to this, just not what year. And 2030 is what we've always wanted. That's what they pushed back on us about. 2035, we wanted it sooner than 2030, but we'd settle for that. And so we continued the positive community pressure, showing him that it absolutely has to be 2030. We were able to get AFL-CIO to write an op-ed encouraging that, and that gave him a lot of comfort knowing that community was behind him seeing that. And then we were able to be a part of the press conference announcement and show our coalition partners who got us that far when he was release the 80 by 50 climate action plan. The next steps of that, though, I'm going to give to Monica because she's been more part of that discussion, but.
Thanks so much, Emily. I really appreciate that synopsis, and especially because you were so closely involved throughout the whole process. And we really appreciate all of your hard work and really coordinating with the mayor's office to make our goal come to fruition. A couple of other things that I'll mention about Denver. So really, what Emily just discussed, number one was bringing together a broad coalition of people. You know, we don't want to do this from just one point of view, because really everyone's point of view matters. It means different things to different people to achieve goals like 100% renewable electricity. And then the more ideas that you can bring to the table about any topic, the better your solution is ultimately going to be. So that broad coalition is just really, really, really critical to the victory that we had in setting the goal for 100% renewable electricity. And a couple other things that I'll say on that is also just people showing up. So not just that these organizations will say on a piece of paper or in an email to the mayor, it's really that he wants to see the members of his community showing up and show that we actually care. And what that also shows is that we're going to give him cover and support when other organizations come and have alternative arguments. And it's important that he knows who he can reach out to in the community to continue to show this support. So it's not just always his voice or some banners of organizations, but real people who make the time in their lives to show up to important events and make their voices heard. And then another thing that I think is an important lesson from Denver that maybe other communities could build on is it was really critical that we fit the 100% renewable energy goal into plans that the mayor was already making and that the Denver Department of Public Health and the Environment was already working towards. So the mayor made a commitment for 80% greenhouse gas reductions by the year 2050 in advance of this campaign. And at DDPHE, they really did know that 100% renewable electricity is one of the best ways to achieve that goal. And so what we've been able to do now is to work this goal that many environmental organizations had into the actual city policies that were already rolling. And it's much easier for the city if you are able to somehow work your goal into their framework, because it gives them a lot of coverage. And particularly now that they have these larger policies around 80 by 50, they're able to continue to take steps and point back towards these policy documents that have been pulled together as support for that and why it needs to happen. So in all of that, I didn't really get to how we're implementing in Denver now, and a lot of that is stakeholders coming together again. So the Denver Department of Public Health and the Environment is holding monthly meetings for stakeholders to gather, and those meetings are by invitation, but you can get an invitation just by letting someone on the committee, like you could let me know if you have an interest in Denver and want to be part of that stakeholder group. And actually, on October 3rd, we'll be talking about how we get to 100% renewable electricity within that group. So we'll have more to share after that.
Hang on. I just want to say that. Yeah, I just wanted to say that there are a number of groups when they talk about stakeholders and they talk about showing up. Climate Reality Project has a corporate sponsorship with Sierra Club. Our version is called 100% Committed. We mobilize all of our people to back up renewable energy commitments on the parts of municipalities. 350 Colorado has their version called Fossil Free Fast. They also are corporate sponsored with Sierra Club. So when Monica sends out a notice that we need bodies in those chairs at the Public Utilities Commission to convince them to shut down Comanches 1 and 2, because if they provide enough renewable power, the city of Denver can buy that renewable power. That helps them reach their goal. So it truly is a community effort, and when one of these people on this stage sends out a call, we need bodies in chairs, we need people to stand up and give their 3 minutes of why this is the right way to go. We need to mobilize as a group, and hopefully that group now includes all of you. No, you're right. Okay. Do you want to talk about how we mobilize to help?
In my area, well, yeah, it's just a big community coming together. Yeah, helping one another. That's how we've been able to do it. Every group, just like I said, one movement is everybody's movement, and we just all come together to fight the different fights that become just one big fight. So.
One key thing that we didn't bring up of the process that was essential in kind of highlighting what Monica said, working within something the city is already doing, is in 2015, 16, when we committed to the Paris agreements, we pushed on Mayor Hancock to create an action plan, essentially, of how we will get there to the 80 by 50. Yes, a compact to mayors. And when that report was created, it was made with 50 plus stakeholders of a wide variety. Excel even had 4 people at the table. This was orchestrated by the city. And they created what they suggested should happen. And then they put it to a public comment period that we worked very closely with to ensure the community was actually heard on the public comment period. We actually were able to far exceed their public comment needs, but just putting something like a zip code on the questionnaire for the public comment period was essential. Translating it, making it that you could do it in paper form instead of just on the internet. We were able to get tablets so that we could do it in person at town halls, and we hosted several town halls trying to reach more people in the community. When Monica says showing up, that is sometimes like a sweeping statement, but what that really means is showing up in all spaces where we don't normally show up on all issues, and being allies and accomplices on more issues than just the environment. And that is how we intersect truly the environmental movement with other issues. We need to show up for other people as well, and not be focused on metrics always when you're tabling and things like that. Be focused on genuine conversations, and like I said, not messaging people at them, but figuring out where they're at by just talking through these issues with them. Don't start with, I'm the Sierra Club, do you want renewable energy? That's like not the first thing on their mind sometimes. So I just want to note that. And also something that we kind of forget to tell about Denver is it is an exceptional situation also, is why we just targeted Mayor Hancock, is because in a lot of cities, the mayor doesn't have as much political control, but he's basically our ultimate decider with Excel. So it's important when you're mapping your community to figure out who are the big decision makers and what are the influences they need to hear from.
But I'd also add that there's a certain amount of naming and blaming that is a part of the techniques that we use. And I'll give a really recent example that's not Denver specific, but is specific to the efforts at a larger level. Golden has a really excellent sustainability plan, and they celebrated 10 years of that plan last week. Wheat Ridge just got its first sustainability committee of all volunteers less than a year ago. That committee submitted a 250-page set of recommendations to the city of Wheat Ridge, and the budget came out last week, and the city of Wheat Ridge budgeted $0 and implemented 0 of the recommendations in that 250-page plan. So the word went out from a Sierra Club volunteer that we needed to go down and talk to the city council, and I did, and a couple of other people did, and And by the end of that, no, by the end of that evening, we had $25,000 budgeted, which is a half-time employee from the city of Wheat Ridge, and a commitment to do things like the Colorado Mills Mall in Golden shut down for 6 months, some cases 9 months, because they lost their entire roof to a hailstorm that also hit Wheat Ridge. There's a new mall going in Wheat Ridge. If they put solar panels on the roof of that mall, all of us with solar panels had no roof replacement. Solar panels are designed to withstand baseball-sized hail. NREL has 3,000 panels on their roof, and they lost 1 panel in that billion-dollar hailstorm. So part of what we do is surround an organization, and Mayor Hancock, when being faced with Longmont and Boulder and Aspen and Pueblo, a low-income community that was literally blackmailing its customers, and I really hope we hear a little bit more about the journey that Pueblo has taken to get to 100% renewable. This is the kind of grassroots momentum that we use to drive not just changes to the climate crisis, but systems change. And hopefully one of the next topics we'll be talking about is all the ballot initiatives that are up on November that you as voters can further help drive yet more pieces of this systemic problem that needs a systemic solution. But I'd really like to hear a little bit more about Pueblo's history and Pueblo's current status, because it's an exciting story.
Absolutely. Like I was saying, I didn't want to get too much into it during my introduction of myself, but Pueblo is currently exploring our utility options beyond our current investor-owned utility via our newly formed Electric Utility Commission. And this is all a result of, this all came from the resolution for 100% by 2035, which is in large part thanks to the Pueblo Ready for 100. But we've also worked together with other community organizations and groups and different diverse community partners like Pueblo's Energy Future, Center for Health Progress, Pillars of Unity, which is a Latina-based organization, Renewable Energy Owners Coalition, and many others. Also, we have several other campaigns here going on. Several other campaigns beyond Ready for 100, like the Fountain Creek Water Sentinels, where we try to clean and protect our watershed, our Fountain Creek watershed, which is very in real bad shape. We get out and do creek cleanups on a monthly basis, and we also have 3 different water quality monitoring teams. We have one here in Pueblo, one in the Fountain Valley region, and one in the Manitou region. And so we're constantly trying to collect data, and that way we have a better case when we come to the EPA and try to get something done about the poor water quality. And the Fountain Creek separates the east side, which is a low-income neighborhood, from downtown and basically the rest of the city. It really runs right through a low-income neighborhood, and so it's a big environmental justice issue, because that otherwise, if not for the pollution, could be a very valuable recreational resource. And for some, especially I believe the Fountain Valley area gets some of their drinking water from the Fountain Creek, and that's really a scary thing to think about, considering the PFAS or perfluorinated compounds issues, if you've heard about that. The water has also tested positive for E. coli and selenium and other pollutants. And so these are some of the other things we do outside of Ready for 100, because there are environmental justice points throughout the city of Pueblo. We've got the Eilers Superfund site that is a polluted area where the soil and everything is polluted from the CF&I steel mill. So like was already mentioned, we are one of the low income communities as a whole, the whole city of Pueblo. And yet we're being charged some of the higher rates in the state and even in the country. So really the whole city is an environmental justice story in and of itself.
Jamie, can you say more about that? What was going on with Black Hills, and I know that there were a lot of disconnections and this whole blackmail thing, because a lot of us don't really know the details. But then this became like a leadership pace nationally. It is so inspiring for many of the rest of us about, wow, we can do this. We can get our cities to agree.
Yes, absolutely. That's been one of our big pushes is community involvement, just trying to have town halls. These are some of the kinds of things that we've done with some of the partners and other organizations that I was talking about earlier. We've had different town halls and community events where we can try to increase the community's engagement and just increase awareness of what's going on, because a lot of people, they see their high energy bill and they know they're getting charged a lot, but they don't necessarily know that one of the lower income communities, being Pueblo, is being charged some of the highest rates. All they know a lot of times is just that their bill personally is higher than they'd like to see it. And so we've done a lot in the way of just trying to increase community engagement. And I think that's really helped a lot, because when it was time to take this to the city council and our county commissioners, we were able to fill the chambers and have community comments just the whole evening. And with strong people like my colleague Merle, who unfortunately wasn't able to make it today, Merle Cooper, as well as David Cockrell, who is there with you guys right now. These are two of the people that really inspired me to get involved. I was able to see them give very informative and inspiring presentations to our city council. And, I was at the time just one of the people there filling the chambers, trying to show my support for this. But it was really inspiring to watch that process and see the successes that our Pueblo Ready for 100 team was having at the time. And this is really where my story with the Sierra Club starts. I came in as the team was already starting to have a lot of successes. And so, that's where a lot of my inspiration came from. And we also had a community engagement event. It was actually more of a series of events. We got permission from National Geographic to show the documentary series, Years of Living Dangerously. And this is another thing that really brought me in personally. I came in, that was one of the first Sierra Club events that I really participated in. And I started out just attending to watch the series, and throughout, as the series went on, I became involved and started helping at the greeting table for the series and different things like that. But that series, I think we probably had over 60 or 70 people for each episode. We were able to fill our local library's theater for every episode. There's something like 12 episodes, and we were doing this every Saturday for 2 months, 2.5 months, or whatever it was. And I think that was one of the ways that we were really able to get the interest of the community. We gained a lot of volunteers from that project, and just a lot of community support, because it was not only was it a informative series, but we also included guest speakers as well as community engagement and questions. It was like a forum after each episode. And as for the Black Hills, I personally know quite a few of my friends that have had problems being shut off. They're single mothers. they're low income, and there's just not been a lot of compassion shown. And so now when Black Hills sees that we are exploring our options and they're trying to appease us, a lot of people, it's really falling on a lot of deaf ears. It's really too little too late.
One of the things I think you have hopefully heard and will hear again over the course of the next day is the concept of the fact that we all must be a single common community. We must all stand up for and watch out for each other. The organization that I volunteer with is focused so much on that we recognize that environmental justice more significantly impacts low-income and minority communities. And a perfect example of that is the recent massive multi-fracking well program that went into place in Greeley, Colorado. They attempted to put 60-plus wells next to an upper middle class, all-white attendance middle school. And of course, the taxpayers and parents of those school children went to their city councils, went to their mayors, and the next thing you know, that set of 60 wells got moved to the low-income, primarily minority middle school called Bella Romero Academy. And that's where we're having the big fight now. So when you look at the brochures that I handed out, you'll see a picture of a playground, and right behind it is a massive drilling rig. In the state of Colorado right now, the laws are 500 feet away from a home and 1,000 feet away from the school building, but not the school property. And the playgrounds surround the school buildings. So the fracking wells are going in a few hundred feet, the next stoplight away from where these kids are exercising, breathing hard, spending their recesses and their lunch periods and their after-school activities. And it is not right that the gas that rich people use to drive their Hummers around is paid for at the respiratory and leukemia and thyroid cancer effects of the low-income brown people of Greeley. This is something that we all, white, black, brown, indigenous, must cooperatively work together and say, not just in my backyard, in nobody's backyard. So that kind of brings me to, to the next set, which is a whole series of collective things we're trying to do on the ballot. And you probably have not received your blue books yet, but I was fortunate enough to be able to comment on a couple of the issues on the ballot, and therefore got to see all the ones that made the ballot. And we've got some great initiatives on fair redistricting of our state and our congressional districts, so that we no longer have this gerrymandering situation going on. We have the outlawing of payday lending, which kind of is like this Pueblo example. In the Pueblo example, if you couldn't pay your electric bill and you were $5 short, they would cut off your bill, and then they would demand that you pay 3 months of your average rate up front to get your electricity turned back on. And that mires you in the permanent cycle of poverty and being owned by your utility provider. And we don't want that kind of predatory business practice taking place anymore. So we have the opportunity to change that in Colorado. We have the opportunity to choose between more roads, more bike paths, more alternative transportation, more high-speed rail. The famous Boring Company, Elon Musk's new company that wants to build a hypersonic underground transport system between Denver and Fort Collins. So you're going to have that choice to make. Do you just want more roads, or do you want more multimodal, more many forms of transportation to see us over the next 20 years? And the two that I'm most involved in are Proposition 112, which used to be Initiative 97. It requires a full 2,500-foot setback. It is important to know that if the fracking well or a traditional well for that matter, but nobody's putting in traditional wells anymore because we sucked all the oil out already. So now we have to dig deeper than ever before and go through the shale, and that requires fracking. But this will require a 2,500-foot setback, but only if the well goes in after the homes. So for example, if you look at the new plan for Commerce City, in every single new subdivision save one, so now I'm wondering who lives in that subdivision, every single one of them is being fracked. Every one. They built the housing division, the housing subdivisions first, and then they sold the mineral rights and are coming in the back door. They tried and failed to do the same thing in the entire Stapleton area, Stapleton Northfield area of Aurora last year, and they are already back to do it again. This is happening where all of the people in Colorado live, and we need to make it very clear to everybody who's voting on this initiative that if the well was there first, you can put that well in your front yard if you choose to build your house there. There is nothing in this initiative that stops you from building a house anywhere you want to build a house. But if your house was there first, or if that property is owned by a school district for future development of a school, then they cannot put a new fracking well within 2,500 feet of that physical space. They will talk to you about 1 mile circles. But in any one direction, if you can't take it 2,500 feet away from an occupied building, don't build there. Now let's talk about an example of where this is taking place right now. There are 88 wells going in between the Broomfield and the Boulder County line from a company who has the worst failure rate for leaks, explosions, and accidents in the state. And they moved the 88 wells on that well pad from the Broomfield County to Boulder County and back to Broomfield County based on which county commissioners were going to give them the hardest time and put the most restrictions on their drilling operations. And why and how could they do that? Because they build one giant concrete pad and they go down 2 miles and then they go out. Lateral well drilling, horizontal drilling in every direction for miles. So the location of the wellhead can be miles away from where the oil is being drawn. So when they tell you that it's going to shut down drilling in 84% of Colorado, not unless 84% of Colorado has homes on it. Last time I checked, that is not the case. So that's one piece of important information to know about Prop 112. Another important piece is it'll cost us 150,000 jobs. The Department of Energy says there are 17,000 oil and gas jobs in Colorado. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says there are less than 30,000 jobs in all of Colorado in oil and gas drilling. Now, granted, those do not include things like contract electricians and truck drivers. But I propose to you that contract electricians and truck drivers will find other contracts and other things to haul if they cannot haul natural gas and oil. So I strongly question whether the loss of, let's say, 25% of those 30,000 jobs would result in a cascade of a loss of 150,000. Another piece of important information to know is that we charge oil companies 1/5 of what the state of Wyoming charges oil companies. And since the Denver-Julesburg Basin runs from Wyoming all the way down the Front Range of Colorado, and you can drill for miles underneath the ground, where do you suppose they're going to put those wellheads? I think they're going to put them where they have to pay the state 1/5 of what they pay the state of Wyoming. Another piece of information. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see a hand raised.
I was curious when you were talking about the jobs piece, what like labor orgs or unions were involved with writing the
I shouldn't say we, because it's primarily a bunch of volunteers, and mostly those people were staffed from 350 Colorado, and they formed a nonprofit called Colorado Rising to pass this ballot initiative. But they worked with the SEIU, and I believe it's 45, but I am not an expert on numbers, and they also worked with an AFL-CIO chapter.
The AFL-CIO has not completed their study of the full-fledged amount of oil and gas workers in every state in the United States. The number they had out, which was in the NRDC's and E2's last jobs report, is actually, they feel, somewhere between 100 and 150,000 more than what they had in the last report. And that is not oil, that is not gas station workers. That is, people need to remember how much oil and gas companies contract out many things. And so when they're filing for who is their employers, there's a whole different numbers you have to consider. And the other big thing to note there is that, yes, oil and gas is a huge problem in general and in the state of Colorado, but like two things. One, first and foremost, historically, we have been doing this first and foremost with coal in our communities with environmental injustice, specifically in Colorado. It is not a secret that the majority of people of color live within 30 miles of a coal burning power plant, and on average it's like 30% are Caucasian. In Colorado, majority of our fossil fuel use is still coal. That is one of the huge pollutants to our air, specifically here in Denver, and one of the biggest problems in Pueblo. Now, I'm not saying we don't need to address oil and gas, but when we're talking about the majority of our fossil fuel use, that's still coal. And that's a much smaller amount of jobs, but it is still needs to be considered. And when we're looking at jobs transition plans, thinking through a way that we justly transition coal plants, which there are currently 8 or 9, David, 9?
I was going to say 12.
Okay, I thought there were 9 active. When you look at Tri-State, okay. And now 2 less when Comanche 1 and 2 eventually shut down, but that is an exorbitant amount compared to most of the country, how much we are reliant on coal. That is a much smaller plan that we can implement and figure out how we justly do that for workers before we take out hundreds of thousands of oil and gas jobs.
Yeah, and I want to tie it back to unions, because unions and jobs are a really important part of managing this whole transition. I am very fond of saying, let's not make West Virginia's mistakes and Ohio's mistakes and Pennsylvania's mistakes. We know that jobs will be lost. We also know that already the number 1 and number 2 jobs in the nation are solar installer and wind turbine technician. In the case of the Comanches 1 and 2, we worked extensively with the Public Utilities Commission and with Xcel Energy to mandate that all the coal workers at Comanche 1 and 2 were retrained to new jobs in the new renewables plants. And that is a commitment that we have to make going forward to all of the people affected by this transition, because frankly, oil and gas is not just affected by renewables, it's affected by the same problem that coal has. It's being automated and mechanized. And when that happens, more and more people lose jobs.
Can I?
Yeah, please go, Jeannie.
Okay, where was I? Speaking of unions and jobs, that's where much of my experience with the push towards clean energy has come in. Since I came in, when our team was already having a lot of successes as far as our city renewable energy resolution and things like that. Most of my experience has been with, since the resolution and all that stuff. And so a lot of it's been with talks that we've been having. We've called them blue-green conversations with local labor leaders. And between the local labor leaders and environmental leaders. And this has all been in an attempt to make sure that we're transitioning to clean energy as equitably as possible. And our hope is to find common ground, of which there's plenty, with labor leaders, and show that we should be natural allies, even though there are those who would try to pit us against each other over the one single issue of jobs. One of the things that that I learned in these talks that I guess I hadn't really considered previously is that these people are family people, and they're concerned with the immediate future of their family. And a lot of them acknowledge climate change and the need to switch to renewable energy for the sake of the health of their own families. But at the same time, they don't want to undergo major career changes in their midlife years or later. And so they often vote against those that are looking to solve climate change because of the simple fact that climate science deniers aren't likely to cause them to have to be retrained for new jobs in the renewable energy industry. And so, this point was made several times in our talks. It's obviously problematic on multiple levels, but this is their perspective.
Jamie, are you able to play there's a little video that
Yes, I was actually going to mention that.
On your computer, that would be great.
Yeah, I have that pulled up right now. I can play that now if that's okay.
That would be perfect. Okay.
Okay.
Was there
Let me
else?
set
And
up
then
my
I want to
screen
have,
sharing.
actually, yeah.
I'm sorry?
Really quick, because I want to get David in here.
Before you place that. It is great, the idea of the retraining program for Pueblo, and what Jamie says highlights on it. The aspect there that labor has an issue with really is that it's not one size fits all. That there isn't going to be a solution that is okay for each worker, and you need a multifaceted plan of different ways that all these people transition, because they're at different points in their lives. Maybe some of them want to go to an entirely different field, and you need different forms of support. They're also at different income brackets, that not all of them, but some of them transitioning into renewable energy will be a drastic step down. And there's ways that we have to think about that. And yes, there's other industries that we didn't do this transition for. That does not mean that we should not be doing it now.
Thanks so much. Pension bridging was one of the things that came up at RISE. So these are all things we need to talk about. Okay, just hit play, Jamie. I think we're good.
Okay.
Can you make it large on your screen?
Yes. Let me know.
There it is. Perfect.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
I enjoyed growing up here in Pueblo. I ran around, I was more into school activities, track, tried to stay out of trouble as much as possible. Pueblo was classified as a steel city, because that's where we got a lot of our income from, was from the steel mill. When it started closing down, that's when a lot of the activity and everything started slowing down here in Pueblo.
Our city is 25% below the poverty level. More than 1,700 homes in the city of Pueblo get shut off each quarter due to the high rates that our electric provider has, and that's a great disadvantage to the people.
As long as I've had my utilities shut off, my bills was 2 years. When the winter did get real cold, you can only cover yourself so much. I didn't know for sure. Well, this is going to be the time I go to sleep and I don't wake up. I'm just one of many that was in this predicament.
Embracing energy equity is so important in Pueblo because we have a huge community of people that currently do not have access to renewable energy. It is encouraging that we have one of the largest solar farms in North America right in our backyard. And despite that energy doesn't service Pueblo, it creates hope for the future. We are unstoppable. Another world is possible. Then we went ahead and reached out to community leaders, government leaders, and have them become partners in the process, and really brought the community and the government officials together in a way that hasn't historically happened in Pueblo. So that we really all together owned in February 2017 this commitment resolution for 100% renewable energy by 2035.
I hope I'm around to see the solar energy. But if not, I hope my kids are around to see it and enjoy it.
Jamie, thank you and Meryl so much for sharing that and the work that you did and that you're still leading in Pueblo and the San Luis Valley. We really appreciate it, and also the Sierra Club and RF 100 support of this event. And Jan, you were at the Jefferson County RF 100 event. Do you want to say anything about that?
I think we've covered it, which is
okay.
Which is
then we'll.
RF 100 counts on everybody's involvement. We count on being able to send out we need people for this event on this topic. And, we accomplished this at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment in order to convince them to support low emission and zero emission vehicles. We overpacked that room. We do it every time the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission meets to approve yet another 80 well plan in people's backyards. They have never turned down a permit to drill, despite the fact that we overflow that capacity every 3 months. And it would be really nice if every once in a while they said, no, this is not environmentally safe to the surrounding environment. You can't drill here, but that has yet to happen.
Most hearings aren't made public very well. They're not that equitable in the times, the locations, the day of the week. That's another huge problem. And that historically, in the state, we have not been doing our due diligence, including everyone in the conversation, and even at our governmental structural levels aren't making this any more inclusive.
So we've got to share our skills, our knowledge, our friends, our communities. We have got to work together instead of in our individual silos. That's why this is about systems change, not climate change, because it's an entire system that needs to be transitioned, and we need to learn from the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. We don't need to leave all the coal miners from Newcastle behind.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And this is so apt. In fact, even our very panel here, we had more people who were going to come from Greeley, from other, but again, the time and the place, it's very difficult for people who are working multiple jobs or have various other obstacles, but that just puts it more on us who actually have a little bit more time and in resources. We need to figure out how to step up to the plate, and I learned a lot this session, so thank you so much for sharing that. And David, if can you lend any insight from the Pueblo effort? I saw your picture in a lot of the
I'm David Cockrell from Pueblo. I was in on the whole thing from the beginning, I guess is the way to say it. And I think at this point that maybe what would be most valuable for me to say is this. There really, in Pueblo, there have been 3 initiatives. And the first one was the Ready for 100 initiative, which was obviously Sierra Club driven. And the second one is an effort to basically replace our local utility, which is the other investor-owned utility in Colorado, Black Hills Energy. And the third initiative is the Colorado Energy Plan, which was just passed, and that's the closure of Comanche 1 and 2 and the replacement of that coal-fired power plant, those power plants with 1,700 megawatts of wind and solar, much of the solar to be built in Pueblo County. So there's 3 initiatives. And from the perspective of this panel and this session, what I would say is that if Pueblo demonstrates anything in this regard, it is that there's synergy across these initiatives. And each of the initiatives feeds off the others and brings in more and more people and more groups. And so we had and the Pueblo story is an unfinished story. I mean, despite this, we still have our utility and we still have the same problems, and we have not reached 100% renewable energy. So we don't know how that story will end. But what we see is that every iteration, every chapter that comes on board brings empowerment to disenfranchised communities. And so, I mean, we are a majority minority community, and so we've brought together people from across the spectrum of races and ethnicities and economic status and gender and in every way. And so it really has been a great element of empowerment in community building. Well, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to take a lot of time, but the primary coalition in Pueblo is called Pueblo's Energy Future, and it's what's called a collective impact initiative in the Kania and Kramer from Stanford have a whole literature in sociology about collective impact. So we've brought together Faith Leaders in Action, the Homeless Shelter, the Recent Immigrants Services Program, which is through the Catholic Church, the renewable energy community, the environmental community, and along with attorneys and energy consultants. And this coalition of leaders that was the coalition that put together the Ready for 100 application that got us on board as one of the first 10 pilot communities in the nation. That's the coalition that has decided that we have to have a replacement for Black Hills. We convinced the city council to vote 7-0 to study the off-ramp from the franchise agreement in the middle of the franchise, and that comes up next year. And so we're heading for a referendum of the people to stop that franchise in midstream and municipalize the utility. And so these are the elements of community building, and the faith community has been, the progressive faith community has been at the center of this. Now, the evangelical community and the Catholic community have not joined in, and we still want that, and we still are in communication with these groups. But yeah, there are a dozen churches that are involved in our effort. Yeah, that's enough for me.
Thank you so much. Any last comments? Or Karen Dyke was going to be with us today, and I've found their story very inspiring too, because they had a similar situation in Longmont that we've had in Lakewood, of the council and the mayor not, just being so supportive of this. And I was trying to get Karen to come and tell their story, but they're having their big fundraiser of the year this weekend, and she said, we followed the Sierra Club Ready for 100 playbook, like Emily was saying, in terms of the power analysis and where are the levers here, or how can we influence, what church are they a part of, how can we reach these folks, basically. And she said, we followed that, and we recruited new people to run for commissioners. This probably wasn't in the playbook, but I don't know. They took it to the next step, I guess. So we it's just a great story, Pueblo and in Longmont. Tyrone Newsom was part of our team as well that was pulling this together. He's a young African-American man, very accomplished, who also has a disability, and his disability is really heightened by the pollution in the I-70 corridor. They make his breathing and epilepsy worse. So, but again, not all of these folks can get here. I'm very grateful for the stories that we heard today. A lot more things we can do. Now that we've heard about some of these, and hopefully we'll be finding more ways to connect some of our housing issues as well. Do you have any particular requests to make of us? Hersey?
So we have been trying to fight the owners a lot. We stopped the rezoning. This has been going on for 2 years now. So we stopped the rezoning. They thought we weren't going to put up a fight. They thought they could just kick us out like that. But we did put up a fight, and they didn't do the rezoning, and we were able to pass an amendment where we could stay for 10 more months, which were supposed to be up by the 30th of this month. And the city and the owner are trying to come up with a plan or where they were going to let us stay till February. But the owner has yet to sign that agreement. So we're going to find out in October, I guess, when we go and pay our rent to see if we're able to stay or not. But as of right now, we are attending every council meeting and just asking the mayor and saying, what are you going to do? Are you going to help us? The problem is that there are no spaces in Aurora to move a mobile home. And if there is, there just isn't. If we have to move either to Colorado Springs or somewhere further out, and we would have to pay the cost of 15 grand or so to move that home. So as of right now, we are just attending every monthly meeting that they have, and just trying to, I guess, just pave the way for the next people that are going to come, because there are more mobile homes communities in Aurora, which within the next 5 to 10 years will close down. So we just want to maybe make a law that will cover them in some way and help them in some way. It might not be in effect soon enough to help us, but I know that all these families will benefit from that. And as far as the immigration, I guess we're just, there's no, just if it's in your power to vote to defund ICE, you guys can help with that.
That's right. So ICE has only been around since 2003. It hasn't been there forever. It doesn't have to live forever.
Hey, my name is Ethan. I'm a grad student at Naropa studying environmental leadership. Thank you all for being here. Just want to make a quick announcement. I've been working on the fracking ballot initiative for 2,500 foot setbacks, collected hundreds of signatures this summer. And this Sunday, there's going to be a rally for this Proposition 112 in Northwest Denver at Inspiration Point Park. We're going to rally there at 5 p.m. and then march at 6 to demonstrate outside the Democratic Party fundraiser featuring Hillary Clinton, Jared Polis. You can attend that fundraiser for $1,000 to $10,000, or you can join us outside. Your choice.
Thanks.
I would just like to say that your story is exactly why we have to show up for other people and other issues. If people are worried about their homes and they're worried about ICE and they're worried about their immigration status, how can we expect them to feel the security to stand up and protest with us at an environmental rally? We need to be showing up in all spaces that build our community so that we can actually create sustainability for all of our community. And I also would just like to encourage people that if you don't feel like comfortable with intersection or environmental justice, I'm loud, it's okay. That the NAACP actually has put out a series of reports in the last 5 or 6 years that go from energy burden, it's called Lights Out, they have Cold-Blooded that talks about the effects of coal plants on people of color, specifically African Americans. They have a Just Jobs toolkit talking about the multitude of different ways that you can do a just transition. They have a youth toolkit. They also have another report that has to do with toxics and oil and gas stuff that I can't think of the name right now, but that's all on their national website. So while the Sierra Club and Climate Rally and all of us are doing great things, I just think it should be kept in mind that just because they're not an environmental organization doesn't mean that this isn't on their priority and the forefront of their focus as well.
Hi, Ken Regelson from EnergyFreedomCO, Colorado.org.
And I have to say, the Ready for 100 campaign, Sierra Club has done a fabulous job of getting people to sign on to 100%. You have more than 1 million people, I think, by the time you add up all the communities that have said yes in Colorado. That's fabulous. But there's no cost-effective, reasonable way to get there other than with your incumbent monopoly. I'm part of the key municipalization effort of Boulder. I know how hard municipalization is. I'm fabulously thrilled that Pueblo is considering that, but I don't think you're going to get Denver to consider municipalization. Well, eventually it will be, because eventually the franchise will come up, or they'll get to their halfway point or their 15-year point.
Mayor and the city of Denver, whether or not they pursue that franchise agreement.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
You're holding the microphone, I'm sorry.
So, my understanding is nothing compared to yours, Ken, but is that the government officials will be making the decisions about whether or not to continue with the franchise agreement, and that those negotiations will start just a couple years in advance of the franchise agreement. And I understand that perspective of, if Denver's franchise agreement doesn't even come up until 4 years before the goal is supposed to be achieved, and what Excel has on the table right now doesn't achieve the goal, then how do we actually meet this goal that we set? And that's something that we're really starting to work with Denver Department of Public Health and the Environment on how that path is going to be charted, because this is a plan now with the city, so the city does have an obligation now to keep moving forward with this 80 by 50 plan and to determine how that path is charted. And I'm really hoping that through that, we're able to really demonstrate to those who get to make the decision on whether we pursue the franchise agreement with Excel or not, really the importance of that, and to start talking about it sooner than later. And there are other considerations to take into account there with franchise agreements. Denver gets a franchise fee for having a franchise agreement, and we have to think about how that money is going to be made up, among many other things. I think David has a question.
Yeah. So one of the things that needs to be done there, so they mentioned does everyone here know what those franchise agreements are? So this is why we need to be in communication with having coffees with our city council people, because ultimately it's the cities that have these monopoly agreements with Excel. And it is very peculiar, it sounds, that the city is not allowed to talk about their own franchise agreement and doing something different. But they have signed an MOU with Excel where, I don't know if that was in the fine print or whatever, but they're not allowed to talk about that?
They can't reopen the franchise agreement until 2027.
Are they more restricted somehow, or what's the deal here? Can you explain?
I don't know the details, and I'm not going to speak to something that I don't know.
Sure. Okay. All right. So maybe we just do. Yes, right. So, yeah, so that's a step. That's a step that needs to occur. It needs to go from being a franchise fee to an occupancy tax. It's the same thing, but the city has a little more control over it.
Well, Monica, I just wondered if there's any more detail under discussion about the actual roadmap to achieving 100%. I've read that MOU between Excel and the city, and it's very vague and generalized and full of flowery language, but with no specifics whatsoever. And I might have overlooked it. It's been a while since I read it, but I don't recall anything in there about, relinquishing the city's authority, statutory authority, to withdraw from the franchise agreement at the midpoint. The midpoint is 10 years, and then it can be either 10 years or 15 years in, is what's in this statutory loophole. But the question for you is there any more detail under discussion about the actual roadmap of either if Denver stays with Excel, how they would move forward to 100%? And maybe I'll just elaborate one more second and then give you the mic. Because it looks like one way forward is it's almost like the musical Rex game, renewable energy credits game, wherein Denver supposedly gets all the renewable electrons out of Rush Creek and the new wind farms that are coming out of the CEP, and everybody else gets coal-fired electrons. And I never trust that stuff anyway. When you buy these RECs and you imagine that this stuff's only coming from renewable energy. And that could happen in Pueblo too. We don't have our roadmap forward either. So let me give you the mic, and just if there's anything, I'm just dying to know how Denver is talking about making progress on this, and that's my question.
Thanks, David. So, I have to say that DDPAG has just started to open the conversation with stakeholders about how this is going to happen. And there's a meeting on October 3rd where they're going to lay out the plans to stakeholders of how they think that this is going to happen. I know that Denver does have some ability to put some local generation on buildings that are actually owned by the city, and that can help them towards the municipal goal that was set simultaneously. But I think that, what you guys are bringing up is real, and it's something that I've really been worried about from the beginning of this process, that we are kind of saying two things at once, that the city is making commitments to continue to work with Excel at least through this franchise period, at the same time as having this goal. So, now is when the rubber meets the road, figuring out how it happens. And, from the very beginning, Sierra Club has been saying that this is about getting the commitment. And I have always been in the camp that we need to get out in front of how the commitment is actually achieved. And, I hope to stay very engaged with the city of Denver and with the club to make sure that this isn't just about fuzzy math in the end.
So from what I have been told, and this could be, correct me if someone knows better, but what could be the benefit if utilized properly of the MOU is it gives us an official agreement to go to the PUC as a entity to argue with businesses and developers and negotiations that we didn't have as a platform before when going to developers and businesses. That gives us a lot more power and weight than we did just the community. That's my basic understanding of what the MOU could do.
I want to hear from Ken here too before we wrap up here and move on to Michael. It looks like David has one more thing. But there is one obvious solution is that the utility, our utility, Excel, needs to shift much faster. They basically need to get closer to 100% by 2030. We rely on our utility, and if they want to continue to be our utility, we need to see a map to 80 by 2030 or something pretty close a lot sooner. We need to see that now. So that is something we can collectively band together to ask for. Peter Sautel is here, and the Sierra Club and 350 and Colorado Coalition for a Livable Climate and IPL came together last fall to ask, Excel to do this as well. And my dad and a number of other people were here and delivered those petitions that we collected last year to ask for a schedule of coal plant closures by 2030. And to meet some of these. Now, I know there are other ways to get there too, and I couldn't possibly say anything about that, but Ken can.
So actually, Larry Milosevic, who's one of the volunteers for energyfreedomco.org, colorado.org, is looking into this question of, we've got the Sierra Club getting these incredible commitments, but what's the real path forward that's cost effective? And there's sort of 6 choices, and he's basically going through and looking at other states, what other states have done on each of these policy choices. And what he says is, there are pros and cons to each of these choices, and that this needs to be a big discussion throughout the state that says, okay, here's the starting point. These are these 6 things. We can fill in some blanks that we'll have. Well, one of them is the doing it with Rex and letting Excel charge things the way they'd like to. Another is to go to full electricity competition, which was what my talk was earlier today, and I'm happy to talk through that with anybody that's interested. Another mechanism is community choice aggregation, which is a mechanism in California. All of these will require some kind of legislation to make them work. But the thing we need to do is be sitting down and having coherent, clear, statewide conversations with data of what's been done in other places so that we can start formulating what we'd like to see on a statewide basis. And so this is something I'd be happy to pass on. We have a one-pager now. He's working on a much longer document that will get into detail on the different choices. But we don't have a specific recommendation. We think that's really a statewide decision. Yeah, energy freedom, we advocate for competition, but that could come in a variety of ways. So that's kind of the background on that.
So just to wrap up,
yeah, I know.
If you get a message from this panel, if you get a message from this conference, the message is, of course, vote. We really need this vote. But show up. Do you want to say time? Come to the October 3rd meeting. Put some bodies in the chair. Tell the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment how important this cause is to you. Come to these meetings, get educated, learn about the alternatives, and help advocate for changes at your city, at your state, at your federal government. All voices everywhere.
I'm so grateful. Yeah, thank you. You are all fantastic.